For better or for worse, Smash encompasses a very diverse age bracket. You've got kids anywhere from 13 or 14, matching wits with people who are in their mid-20s or better. And that said, while there's never a wrong time to get into competitive Smash or fighting games in general for that matter, those who enter in their mid to late 20s do so with some anxiety about their capabilities with respect to their younger contemporaries, or in other words, they worry that they're just too late to get good. And that's not really all that surprising considering how much folk knowledge circulates and goes taken completely at face value regarding ideas like talent, primes, and things like that. These sorts of ideas predominate all spheres, not just Smash. In the art world, people have internalized the idea that if you're over 25 and haven't accomplished anything in your art, that your ship has long sailed, and many people choose not to pursue art for that reason because they feel like they got to the party too late. Same's pretty much true of Smash. Because of a need to explain achievement but no good explanations to do so, folk wisdom then starts to develop and then crutches on things like reaction time or other abilities thought to be proportional with age, but when it comes to intellectual hobbies like Smash or art, age and the associated effects thereof have almost no impact on your ability to get good in my estimation, and I feel like I can make a good argument for that case both from scientific literature and from my own personal lived experience. So, what then are some of the things people worry hinder their ability to compete? Let's knock them out one at a time, starting with my favorite, reaction time. Reaction time does in fact deteriorate with age, with the consensus being sometime after 24 years old when it's thought to have peaked. But to leave the statement at that as it so often is highly misleading. Not only is the reaction time that deteriorates with time not even the kind that's important, it deteriorates at such a negligible rate that between a 20-year-old and a 65-year-old, there's maybe a difference of 20 to 40 milliseconds. Or, in other words, a frame or two. A frame or two. Almost no meaningful interaction in any fighting game consistently hinges on a threshold of a frame or two. Moreover, this kind of reaction time is called simple reaction time, which only really matters if you plan to compete with people on humanbenchmark.com for the fastest click speed. No. The kind of reaction time that does matter is choice reaction time, which is how fast you make decisions, which is almost uniquely determined by your ability to anticipate and think efficiently, things that of course have no age limit. So, reaction time is a completely immaterial worry that you can put to bed. I'm 30 years old, and I've fluctuated between first and second in Idaho since the game's release, and I'm able to consistently win against high and top level players anywhere from half my age to a few years younger or older. Next is time allowance and the perception of lost time or making up for lost time. How can you possibly compete with people who have more time than you do or who have invested vastly greater amounts of time than you could ever hope to? This one is a pretty straightforward matter of how you practice. As I and many other Smash people have pointed out many times before, quality of practice is not the same as amount of practice. If you're diligent about structuring your practice, that is, doing simple things like making lists of individual things to work on and consistently reviewing your VODs, then you'll find that you don't actually need all that much time to make meaningful progress, at least relative to the thousands of hours of mostly non-productive grinding most of us do. But with good structure and less time waste, it's perfectly doable to make up for lost time since, as I mentioned, a majority of time people spend playing this game is actually not productive, or at least very minimally productive. I stream upwards of maybe 10 to 15 hours a week, and I only ever get better during the maybe 1 or 2 hours where I do things I mentioned above, like make lists and consciously try new things and do conscious reviews of my gameplay. Which is to say, I could spend maybe 1/10 of the time that I currently do playing the game and historically have, and with more consistent structured practice be exactly where I am. Beyond that is the perceived social stigma. It's probably not a lot of fun being a grown-ass 20-something and being in an environment where you can get humbled by people 2 education tiers beneath you. But there's really not a whole lot to say about this aspect because it's largely a psychological rather than practical or technical one, other than you just need to be secure enough in yourself as a person as to endure little Timmy excitedly tugging at the sleeve of his chaperone while pointing at you rudely and exclaiming, "Look, Daddy, that's the big ugly loser I just beat." Last is not a specific worry, but the sort of general nebulous idea that there's just something magical about being below a certain age, like the age of 25. Being below the age of 25 is venerated for some reason, and you see this shit everywhere. In the art world and other places, you hear this all the time, that if you don't do anything by the age of 25, you're out of luck and you may as well not bother. Obviously, I argue with quite a bit of conviction, if you couldn't tell, that that's not even close to true. While this may be true of certain things like MMA, where age does play more of a role, in pursuits that aren't extremely physically demanding, it's just not worth dignifying that notion with anything more than saying it's just not true. Negligible changes do occur over time, but whatever negligible biological changes occur, like simple reaction time deteriorating an itty-bitty tiny little bit by single-digit milliseconds, the general consensus, and my own personal lived experience, is that these changes make either no perceptible difference, or you can compensate fairly easily for those negligible changes. So, with all this said, why do younger people seem to get good so quickly, or why is youth so vaunted and revered if there's nothing insurmountably magical about it in terms of Smash or other fighting games? I mean, there's gotta be some purchase to this whole notion, right? I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, what a ridiculous idea. It's preposterous that we would collectively invent nonsense explanations for phenomena we don't quite understand. And of course, I am being sarcastic. But I do think the origin of this kind of thinking does have a few explanations. When we're adults, we realize that our time is valuable, and so when we choose something to spend our time on, we see it as an investment, so we're actively trying to get good at whatever that thing is. Teenagers, on the other hand, rarely view things that way, and so are free to dump loads of time into certain hobbies without the self-imposed pressure of getting good within a certain time frame. When you pressure yourself to achieve, it creates a sort of time dilation effect, in the same way time passes excruciatingly slowly when you're staring at a clock, and for that reason becomes significantly more painful to endure, because just like time passes slowly when you're conscious of it, so too do skills develop slowly when you're conscious of them developing. So, the issue has a lot to do with the fact that we perceive what may be equal amounts of time invested into things differently depending on whether we view it as a leisure activity or something in which to achieve. To that, it's also sometimes indeed a little harder to internalize things as an adult than as a kid, but that shouldn't be interpreted as a stat cap, but rather at absolute worst, a slightly lower stat multiplier that can generally be made up for. At the end of the day, I think the only barrier is willingness and commitment. As a 20-something, it's harder to commit to these sorts of things, both psychologically and logistically. But like I've been saying, in both my lived experience and research on topics like reaction time and decision-making abilities, there's very little, if flat out nothing, in principle that makes a mid to late 20s person less capable than a teenager in domains like art and, indeed, Smash and other fighting games. So at that, I think that's about it. I personally was a late bloomer in just about everything, so I had to sort of wade through a lot of doubts over the course of nearly a decade about having not gotten while the getting was good myself, so to speak. So this is a topic I'm glad I finally had an excuse to address, because it really is my sincere belief, one again supported in some aspects by lived experience and in others by the scientific literature, that there are basically no insurmountable disadvantages or advantages to certain ages with regard to getting good at something like Smash, at least not for any other reason than because it's just harder to find time for things as an adult. So, I hope my take on this maybe saves some of you 20 or 30 or whatever somethings out there a little bit of ass ache wondering if your ship has sailed or not. Hi guys, me and this giant disgusting zit on my face would like to thank you guys for making it all the way to the end of another one of my videos. And as I'm sure you've noticed, I made a few formatting changes. Thought I'd put some old pictures to use. I thought it was a cute idea. Hopefully you guys thought it was cute too. I don't know. But in any case, while I'm thanking people, as usual, I'd like to thank the very kind people who support me on Patreon. If you envy these people's names being up here and you would like your name to also be up here, i.e. support me on Patreon, not only would I be deeply honored and very grateful to you for that, but I also try to give people their money's worth when they support me on Patreon, such as doing VOD analysis, streamed VOD analysis, either on Twitch or YouTube, free digital copies of songs, usually the ones that I use in videos like the one playing in the background here, and hopefully in the future I'll think of more things to make that a little more worthwhile as well. So once again, I will, well maybe not once again, I don't think I've said this yet, but I will link to my Patreon in the description, and Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys watching very much.